Good afternoon, dear friends. We are continuing our expert dialogues here in Moscow this January. Our topic right now is sovereignty and how it is evolving in the modern world. Historically, we have tended to think of sovereignty in terms of borders, but the new technologies and platforms are radically changing the landscape. Joining me today is Dr. Rais Hussin, founder of EMIR Research. Crucially, Dr. Hussin has spent years working at the intersection of public policy and tech innovation. This gives him a unique perspective from both sides, making his insights particularly valuable for us today. Let's get started. In your work and presentations, you discuss a shift from territory to an architecture of sovereignty. What exactly do you mean by that?
Traditionally, the geoeconomics and geopolitics has been in a way that it tailors to certain controlled sovereignty, so to speak, meaning you can govern within a certain area, certain way of doing business, and all this is governed by the financial might of the certain unipolar world circumstances. And when we talk about moving away from just geographical territory, I give an example. In Malaysia, for instance, more than 80% of our retail businesses are done online, and out of that 80%, about 90%, close to 90%, are from overseas. So territory is not confined to just geography; it is now platform, and increasingly, platform is going to dictate how the world is going to operate economically and trade. And obviously, with that comes also the protocols, the standards, all the other factors included in that platforming. So I think that is why I think we are moving away from just territorial to more what we call platforming, and in a very interconnected world.
We will definitely dive deeper into platforms shortly, but looking at this from a national perspective, what infrastructure is becoming critical in the modern world? We're used to thinking of power lines, communications and roads, but today what is taking on that central role? Is it a new kind of infrastructure entirely? Or could it be models or standards?
When we talk about what are the infrastructure required to accommodate fast growth and equitable growth, the growth that will be felt by many, the growth should not be felt only by the few. I think traditionally, in a very narrow sense of the capital world, is that the growth is there, the GDP is good, but whether the GDP in terms of percentages really felt by the common many, I don't think so. This has been a big problem in the real world. In terms of infrastructure, of course, we need all forms of infrastructure. And many a times we build white elephants of huge infrastructures, but when it comes to the outcome and impact, that is why in Malaysia now we are very focused on input, output, outcome, impact model. So every money that we spend, input and output, must have the desired outcome and impact to the nation and the people. If it doesn't, then we don't go. If you look for the importance, which part of the infrastructure is important, increasingly in a very globalized, interconnected world, something that is always amiss is the sovereign financial infrastructure. And if you do not have a sovereign financial infrastructure where there's mutual respect among the trading blocs or trading countries or trading partners, then it will be a big problem. So to me, coming from a little bit of technology background and economics and finance, I believe that the financial infrastructure is key. We can do a lot of things. We can build beautiful infrastructures, buildings, power grids, this, everything. But if we are not ready with the right financial infrastructure that accommodates global interconnectedness, then we will have a big problem, because it will be run by the very few who will dictate what can be done, what cannot be done. Recently in Malaysia, we had this issue of tariff. And we had to fight that tariff, but again, we are 35.1 million market. ASEAN is 680 million market, and America pushed us to impose a tariff of 25%. It's a big problem because we are, if you look at the GDP to FDI, we are one of the highest in the world, meaning which our international trade is important, trading nation. But are we ready to take on? So for now, what we do is active neutrality. We participate, we discuss, we negotiate, but it is not easy. So even there was an agreement signed recently by our Prime Minister and the US President, but it has not been ratified because the immense opposition in Malaysia towards that particular agreement. Because one of the things, the primary thing that they are focusing on is the financial sovereignty. So I think when we want to build the basic infrastructure, power grid, that is good, fair enough. We need it for the growth. But please do not forget the financial infrastructure.
We will come back to finance. It is indeed a vital issue. But first, let's stick with the topic of platforms, because we need to explain what they actually are to the average person. Right now, most people think of a platform as just an app icon on their phone used to order from online store, book or taxi or access a service. How would you define a platform, and how does it differ from traditional markets or industries?
The apps and all those icons on mobile phone that we are normally relating to as a platform is just the user interface. Behind the user interface, the entire infrastructure is there. Where the products is being sourced, where the products are being manufactured, how they are priced, how they are costed, how the payments are being made, and which transactions are allowing the payments to be made to be able to secure. It's a huge thing behind the platform. So I think on a user interface or from the consumer perspective, yes, it is just the app. But behind that, the entire thing, I'll give you an example that some of the big names platforms in Malaysia, for instance, together they control about 80-90% of the retail market. So what does that mean? It means our retailers in Malaysia will have challenges. So the government have to intervene. How? We are saying that, look, fine, we allow the platforms, we do allow all those transactions and so on, but there are certain regulatory framework that you have to fulfill. For instance, you need to allow our products to be also on the platform. You need to make sure that that is facilitated. There should be some incentives. Platform is just not an app anymore. It is the whole thing. And some countries' GDP is heavily reliant on platforms. You look at companies like Alibaba. Goodness gracious, you look at the numbers, it's staggering. So just during their holiday breaks, it goes through the roof. And why they are successful? Because they have economics of scale products, good products, needed products, at the right cost and the right price, and they have the right platform to enable the entire thing to be completed. So I think platform is just not an app.
We can see that platforms, like the Malaysian e-commerce example you just gave, are swallowing markets whole. In some segments, the platform becomes the market. I always use the taxi example. When you hail a ride through an app, you can't choose the driver or negotiate the price. Everything is assigned to you, and the platform makes these decisions automatically at scale. Given that, shouldn't we treat platforms as critical infrastructure, just as we view power grids?
It is a very critical infrastructure because it can impact the import and export, the balance of trade, your currency, and a lot of things. It is important infrastructure. However, I would always advocate for a reasonable level of regulatory framework, meaning which, yes, you are free to sell, free to whatever, but at the same time, there are some regulatory framework to be fulfilled. I'll give you an example. We also have this Maxim equivalent in Malaysia, who has a near monopoly, and they are so powerful now. They can price at whatever price they want, and they for any restaurant order they charge 35% surcharge over and above that particular meal, plus the delivery charge, which is very expensive. So there's also Maxim actually in Malaysia, for your information, and because of that, by this particular near monopoly, Grab, there are many other newer ones coming out. but we are regulating them. Like for instance, we do not want to allow the labors be taken for granted. That means their benefits, so there has to be a whole of government approach when you come to the platform. A platform, it is a critical infrastructure, not to be written off because it has severe impact on the economy.
We also see many platforms outgrowing their home markets and operating globally. We're talking about social media platforms with billions of users and solutions used identically across the world. Who holds more power today, and especially tomorrow, nations or platforms?
This is the concern that I have always had. If you allow the platform to become a monumentally giant without any regulation, then there will be a problem, because then this platform will be big. I'll give you an example. We have a social media called TikTok, and recently TikTok in the US was bought over, forced to be sold to owner in the US. And what happens? Immediately on the day one, they got rid of many of the influencers who doesn't fall into their narrative of the story. So then they start controlling. So the few billionaires will then start controlling the narrative of the world. And these guys are not elected. These guys do not have any mandate from the people, but they have the money. And they use the money as a lobby to be able to make that country's president to force the sale of TikTok. And now TikTok is in the hands of this TikTok USA, is in this. So I think this will continue to be a big problem. We all know how the media even. So I think government have to be very mindful. Back in Malaysia, we are very, very mindful. We have MCMC, authority that regulates the social media and so on, but not to the extent of controlling, but it is more of guiding, making sure that the certain protocol principles are not infringed upon, especially when it comes to national security.
Let's move on to finance. You touched on this in your report here in Expert Dialogues, describing a shift from a monocentric, star-shaped system to a networked, polycentric one. Could you elaborate on what is happening and explain the key features of this new landscape?
Under the current financial structure, you have one World Bank or IMF or central bankers controlling and guiding or deciding or dictating or determining what happens in the world in terms of economy and finance. I'll give you an example. In 1998, we had a massive financial crisis. Malaysia had not only Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea and a few others. We had a massive financial and currency crisis. IMF came with their bags and World Bank came with the bags and told us, we will approve this loan so that you will recover, but you impose high interest rate, you remove subsidies, you remove this, so they started interfering, wanting to interfere into the governance of the country. At that point of time, we had the Prime Minister Tun Mahathir, who recently, he's quite close to President Putin. In fact, when he was the first time Putin was the president, he actually came to Malaysia. Tun Mahathir hosted him. He was confused, and he says that, look, this cannot be the solution, because the moment we listen to IMF, World Bank and their model of how to resolve the problem, what happens? Interest rate goes up, subsidies goes down, and the cost of capital goes up, cost of everything goes up. Our companies will, in the stock market, will become so cheap in terms of, and then the foreign equities and foreign companies will come and scoop all the power companies, the telecom companies, the banks and this and that. So against this, at that point of time, we introduced capital control and we introduced pegging. We didn't follow at all the IMF, World Bank. We did not take a cent from IMF, World Bank at that time. We did it differently. Of course, at that point of time, goodness gracious, the impact and pressure that we went through was immense. However, we persevered, and we were the first country to come out of the financial crisis quicker, faster, better. So what I'm trying to say is that the current financial hegemony that the global world is undergoing is it's no longer tenable, no longer sustainable. I mean, I will just give an example in the lecture this morning or this afternoon. Malaysia, we plant the seed, we fertilize the plant, we water the plant, we harvest the palm oil, and then we process it, and then this is the number of activities. These are real economy, real activity, and then we export. And this country in the US, for instance, take a piece of paper, print it, and buy, and that's it. And we look at the debt of the US now is about $38 trillion. But who are they going to pay to? Who are they taking the debt from? You and me. We are the one who's, and I think many countries are now beginning to realize this is not sustainable. And even traditional good partners of US even. So what I am trying to say is that let us move away from this unipolar financial system to a more just and balanced financial system. That's where we call it mutual credit clearance, where we can start this. In Malaysia, we have started on a very small scale between the SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises. I was telling this afternoon that bankers wouldn't want to give money to those people who need it. They will give the money to the people who do not need it. So this is a problem everywhere, in Malaysia too. So what happens? So we created this MCC. So we let these SMEs to trade among themselves on a credit clearance and without any cost of capital, interest rate, this and that. So what happens? Today, they have better profit, access to credit, and they will not be able to get it if they go to the bank. So I think this is not something primitive barter. It is an interconnected system using blockchain among the trusted community to do this, and it can be done. It can be done on a country, within country, that means intra-country, then inter-nations, but it has to start somewhere. And traditionally, some people will say, okay, let's not the de-dollarization, and then we go to yuan. But the problems are the same. You are replicating the same issues again. So the trade between Malaysia and yuan, Malaysia and China now, we have no longer used dollar. We use either yuan or ringgit. But we are suggesting in longer term, mid to longer term, let's create this MCC.
You rightly pointed out, and I mentioned this earlier as well, that sanctions, tariffs and restrictions don't actually preserve the status quo. Instead, they accelerate evolution and change. The Russian example shows that restricting payment infrastructure didn't kill foreign trade. It forced a faster transformation, establishing bilateral ties more quickly and shifting the system away from a single center towards a polycentric model. Yet we know the monocentric model stood unchanged for decades. In this transition to financial platforms and a network model, what role does technology play? And what do you see as the most critical factor?
Technology is the center of this, because even in this MCC initiative that we are implementing gradually in Malaysia, technology is everything, because this is where everything starts. It will enable and facilitates as a tool based on blockchain, so that it creates a trusted community of doing transaction within that particular group, and eventually it will expand. I think technology is important. That's why we always talk about financial sovereignty, technology sovereignty, and so on and so forth. But let us define what sovereignty is. Is it like if the data is in your home is sovereign, or is it data is in your territory is a sovereign? I think it is more than data being placed in your place. It is the protocol, the standards, the access. Can it be anonymized? Can it be? So there are a lot of things behind the mechanics of this. But be that as may, I would always strongly, be a technologist myself, I would always advocate the use of technology, and do not be too afraid and fearful of technology so long you know the technology. Let not the technology know you. Let you know the technology. You be part of the technology. You shape the technology. I think that is very, very critical. The moment you let the technology know you or know your country without reciprocity, then there will be a problem, because that means it's all developed outside and they can do whatever they want to do.
That thought leads us seamlessly back to sovereignty. How do these digital platforms in finance and other sections alter the concept of sovereignty and the way nations interact? Will the platformization of the economy ultimately lead to greater fragmentation, with different countries running competing platforms? Or will it improve interconnectedness?
When you talk about sovereignty in the data sphere, we need to be very, very mindful that certain critical data, especially that is involving national security or the citizens' information and all that, must have the sufficient cyber security element built in. Otherwise, there will be a big issue. But talking about fragmentation, I do not think so. Look at China. China has built, if you have a WhatsApp, they have the WeChat. You have these, whatever, they have the Baidu. I mean, they always have an equivalent. And today, they are technologically quite independent, actually very independent, and they keep on evolving. When Android and iOS was forbidden for China to use for their phone, they came up with Harmony iOS. So their thought process, it is not like something like the third.
It is a situation where one side has one system and the other has something completely different. Similar solutions, but distinct, unconnected, and operating in parallel without intersecting.
They are independent, but they are integrated. That means you can still harmoniously use it. For instance, I have a phone that can use WeChat. And so it is based on that devices, right? So you create platform, multi-platforms, and then you make sure that your platforms are secure, cyber security future-proofed. This is very important. And then on top of that, you are actually allowing for a level of integration. So I think fragmentation sometimes should not be looked at as completely a negative element, because you need to secure your borders. You need to secure. In a technology sphere, it is impossible, right? And I was visiting some companies and I realized that, for instance, the warfare is going to be completely different, totally different. It is not going to be the warfare in World War I, World War II, and even now. Things are going to change radically and tremendously with the use of technology. And you probably do not need to have the same fatalities that you would have had in World War I and World War II and the future human fatality. So I think fragmentation in terms of literal, it is okay, but so long it is still allows interconnectedness. So for instance, in Malaysia, we can do all the WeChat, WhatsApp, whatever. We can still do it. And why it is allowed? Because sometimes you need that, the third pillar I was talking about this afternoon, the integrator, the orchestrator, which is the government.
Speaking of the government's role, how do nations and companies prevent themselves from becoming helpless tenants of someone else's infrastructure? You might benefit from a platform today, but if someone can simply pull the plug or flip the switch at any moment, leaving you with nothing, how do you protect against that?
A very important question. I think this one I can relate to I think situation in Russia. Some time ago, when the sanction was initially imposed, SAP just pulled the plug. And Russia had a huge situation and circumstances. And in Malaysia, for instance, when Trump was talking about this tariff, this and that, we had some anxious moments, especially in semiconductor and microchip. As you know, 90%, or more than 90% of supply chain of microchip and semiconductor is in one island called Taiwan. And at the same time, Malaysia quietly significantly contributing to the large chunk of the microchip production of the world. It's a critical component of the supply chain. In fact, when the American was imposing tariff, they excluded microchips and semiconductor from the list. So Yes, to be that is why the vigilance and diligent vigilance of the network of the technology, how it's integrated, how it's interconnected, it is very critical. Many countries of the world, what they do is they are vendor driven. When I say vendor driven, a vendor will come and they say this is good for your country and blah blah blah, and that's it. This has been traditionally the way. I think more and more countries should evaluate carefully, examine critically, and work with partners. And joint development, again, example, microchip and semiconductor. Malaysia is in the forefront. We are producing every micro semiconductor you can imagine of in the island called Penang. And recently we got about 60 billion US investment as a alternative supply chain, a global supply chain for microchip if something happens in Taiwan. So we need to keep on building resilient. We need to build robustness in relationship, in technology, to ensure that we will not be taken hostage by anyone, because there must be always a layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 plans.
Staying on the topic of sovereignty, let's talk about artificial intelligence. There are two key points here. We have seen how large language models have stormed into our lives. From a sovereignty perspective, it is essential to possess fully local, independent large language models. And isn't there a danger in relying on just one or two global solutions?
Again, a very interesting question, because LLM is subject to confirmatory bias. When you talk about confirmatory bias, it depends who developed the LLM, which language, and who is the author of the data, who is the author of all the inputs that are going to be affected in AI. My view is this: you have like the ChatGPT, you have the DeepSeek, you have few others. I think if possible, you need to develop the LLM in your own language domestically. Even a small country like Malaysia, 35.1 million, we are developing LLM based on the local language to reflect local sensitivity, local history, local culture, local society, local everything. Because every time you go to you use or borrow a technology from somebody else, there's always a biasness being built in there. And if you notice, AI highly dependent on LLM, and they are not moving to a sensory, the most sensitive ones. But that's again another part of the thing. Again, China did quite well in that area. They came up with this DeepSeek. The day one DeepSeek, the prices of all the stock market, especially in the US, related to AI, significantly dropped. They spend a fraction of the cost to develop such a powerful thing. But does every country have to rush? My view is that depending on the size and the ability of the respective countries, China, Russia, these are big ones. But countries like Malaysia, perhaps we will do a pocketed LLM, a pocketed because otherwise we will learn our history from the others. That's a big problem. Because if you notice that histories are always written by the victors. And I mean, when I was in the primary school and secondary school, some time ago, the history that I learned about Russia and China is totally different from the history that my children has learned about Russia and China today. Why? Because the history then was written by a certain group of people. So I think there should be a consistent and constant renewal of ability to fit into the play, because otherwise you do not want everything to be dictated by others.
Following on from that, we know one of the primary functions of AI will be the personal assistant. We are approaching this reality very fast. This assistant will guide a person through life, education, healthcare, shopping, and so on, helping them improve the quality of life and their output. Again, should states take control of this process, or will universal global assistance save the world?
I am not very advocate of a universal global assistant too much. World Economic Forum, and these are the group of people who are not elected, billionaires who try to decide and dictate and design how the world should be. We have a generative AI, we have agentive AI, and in my next book, I've written a book, but the next book that I'm writing is self-intelligence. Self-intelligence where AI will be completely independent, including independent of energy, and help us God at that point of time. But having said that, while AI is going to affect considerably, even in the universities, I remember in local university when I was giving a lecture on AI, they were asking, Doctor, my students write English better than Shakespeare in their assignments, and when I ask them to summarize it, they can't finish even one sentence. So what do we do? I said, then you ask them to do assignment at the university, at the classroom. Don't give them assignment home. Then, but sometimes we have to give very long assignments. You don't have to give long assignments. If you have a clarity of thought, you do not need to write 55 pages. 5 pages will able to explain everything. So I think there's always a way to manage you through AI. In Beijing, when I was talking, the fear of AI was so pronounced. They say it's replacing the addiction, this, that, blah, blah. I said, look, from first IR, 2 IR, 3 IR, 4 IR. 4 IR is things are still outside us. 5 IR, things are going to be embedded in us, in the brain and this and that. So humans survive. Jobs are still there. Jobs are being created. Only we need to upskill our jobs and do things differently. Having said that, if you surrender your life to AI, and then that is not life, because everything is determined by somebody else. In fact, in one European country, there's actually an AI minister sitting in the parliament. And in Malaysia, there was some suggestion that they're coming up with a religious AI minister, so that, because in religion, the minister is very swayed according to politics. So in the morning, he said this is perfectly all right according to the religion. In the afternoon, he said no. In the evening, they said okay again, all because of politics. But if you bring in AI, then that political can be eradicated. But then my question is, will not the confirmatory bias and data sets that has been there will affect the AI as well? So these are the continuous discussion and so on. But I'm not an advocate of this universal basic living and all that. That is making us like a pigeon in a hole. That is not the way to go. I think we need to have, AI is part of parcel of life, but we need to change a little bit here and there. As I said, I told the professors, don't give homework, don't give assignments, ask them to do it in the class. So like for instance, the 1 week, Monday to Friday, one day you dedicate all assignments. That means there's no anything in front of you, no mobile phone, no tab, no laptop, no, you write. So that's, I mean, we need to find ways and means. For my children, for instance, I've always educated them to think critically. I said, AI must be used as a tool. By the way, my children are all half Russian, and when I've encouraged them to say, look at the Russian people, look at their Russian history, look how they do things, and you need to learn a lot from that. Don't make that culture, the couch culture of burgers and fries to dominate your life. You must be able to have the thinking capabilities. And how to have the critical thinking? Read. If you read, you will understand. If you understand, you will know. If you know, you will see. AI will just be a tool, cannot be a replacement for education, especially for critical thinking. Otherwise, you'll become that universal whatever thing that the World Economic Forum is trying to advocate.
What scares you personally the most about artificial intelligence?
Personally, I am not afraid of AI because I know AI, but there are people who do not know AI, and they only know artificial is intelligent, and that's about it. But my worry is if AI is misused. That is the problem. For instance, if the students start using ChatGPT for their assignments, for instance, that will, in the next generations or so, will result in issues with regards to intellectual defunct. So I think there should be a good national policy. I remember in Malaysia, I was asked to comment on the national AI policy. It was sent to me. It was 185 slides. So I sent that back to them. I said, use ChatGPT, bring it down to 5 slides. The moment you have 185 slides on national AI policy, meaning you do not know what the heck are you talking about AI. So I think there should be the open forums like this are really a big help. I met few people and we had a good discussion. They wanted my papers and I said, look, it's all downloadable. You go to the EMIR Research website. But the thing is that we need to learn, adjust and know what we are talking about, what we are going to face, what we are facing. Then you need to take that measures preemptively. Do not let everything slide by and then suddenly in 5 years, 10 years time, none of your students will be able to speak anything about anything because, oh, where's the ChatGPT? You know, that kind of thing. So I think my fear is only one, which is the misuse of AI for the wrong things.
We've covered the fears, but what gets you excited about AI? Where do you see the greatest opportunity?
When you use AI as a tool, its intensity, its ability to collate data, and its ability to help giving you some feedbacks, some options, because you can, and depending on the intensity of the feedback that you're looking for. So you can use that as a source of reference, as a tool. And AI also helps in many other things, like in the area of medical. For instance, nowadays you just have a medical booth. You just go there. You don't have to see the doctors anymore. You just go there and basic stuff. Obviously, you cannot do cardiovascular surgery in the booth, but you can do a simple flu fever stuff and so on. So I think it helps. It will help. But again, the right use of AI is very critical. And this is where I strongly believe the government's role as an orchestrator, as a regulator, who will provide that governance, that ambience, but not to control, but more so to provide, hey, this is the right direction. I think if we do that, we have a chance. In Malaysia, I've been fighting that particular cause quite a bit and explained to them that, look, AI can be a very powerful tool for good things and also a powerful thing for bad things. So it all depends on us how we are utilizing the tool.
Let's wrap things up with one final question. If you could share a single thought or idea that would be heard simultaneously by heads of state, business leaders, and ordinary people around the world, what would it be? What is the most important message for humanity at this stage of our development?
That's a very powerful proposition that I have to make to the people. But I would say this. We are all living in one world, a very interconnected world with high intensity for growth. It is time for us to work collectively and importantly in a balanced, equitable way. If you start just extracting and extracting and extracting, exploiting and exploiting, this will not last. And I think the mutual respect must be there. So even in an organization, for instance, my door is all, I'm the CEO, but the door is always open, and anybody can come and talk to me about ideas. Usually I give 5 minutes. So when the ideas are being discussed, these ideas that will enable, empower, and help people. We should be encouraging. So the one message that I would like to need is embrace technology. AI is here to stay. You can't do without it. As we speak, AI is already probably analyzing what we are talking. Make sure that it is recalibrated, reinvented for the right reasons. I think that's the message that I would like to deliver to the people.
I fully agree that the era of exploitation and domination is coming to an end. We must work together to ensure the next era is defined by cooperation and connectivity. I am confident that Russia and Malaysia are doing everything possible to make that a reality. Joining us today was Dr. Rais Hussin. Thank you very much for such an engaging discussion on sovereignty and technology. Thank you.